The Prescott Medical Center was not merely a hospital. It was a fortress of glass and steel that rose above the Philadelphia skyline like a modern cathedral. To the city, it was a beacon of hope, a place where miracles were performed daily by the hands of the elite. But to Stella, who entered through the service loading dock every evening at 6 p.m., it was a reminder of everything she was not. Inside, the air was aggressively sterile, smelling of antiseptic, floor wax, and the metallic tang of high-stakes decisions. Stella adjusted her blue uniform, pulling the collar up to hide the faint scar on her neck, a souvenir from a childhood that felt like a different lifetime. She was 27, but her eyes held the exhaustion of someone twice her age. She was a member of the Environmental Services team, a polite title for the invisible army that scrubbed the floors, emptied the bins, and ensured that the world of the wealthy doctors remained pristine. Stella moved through the corridors like a shadow. She had mastered the art of being present but unseen, keeping her head down, her gaze fixed on the linoleum tiles she polished to a mirror shine. It was a survival mechanism. In this building, visibility was dangerous. Here, she wasn't Stella, the girl who once dreamed of art school. She was just the help, a nameless figure pushing a yellow mop bucket. But there was a specific reason she worked here, a reason that made her heart hammer against her ribs every time she stepped onto the neurosurgery floor. The heart keeps a ledger that the mind tries to burn. That reason was Dr. Logan Prescott. He was the crown prince of the hospital, the heir to the Prescott dynasty, and the most brilliant neurosurgeon on the East Coast. Stella saw him often, usually from a distance. She saw the way the nurses straightened their uniforms when he approached, the way the other doctors fell silent to listen to him. He walked with a sweeping, terrifying grace, his white coat pristine, his stethoscope draped around his neck like a badge of office. He was devastatingly handsome, with dark hair that fell over his forehead and eyes the color of shattered ice, cold, sharp, and intelligent. He was a god in this building. And 15 years ago, in a foster home 200 miles away, he had just been Lo, the quiet boy who shared his lunch with her when the other kids stole hers. They had been inseparable for one golden, tragic summer before the Prescott family found him, adopted him, and whisked him away to a life of Ivy Leagues and private jets. He had promised to write. He had promised to come back. But the letters never came, and Stella had learned the hardest lesson of poverty. People like Logan Prescott don't look back. They ascend. Now, she scrubbed the floors he walked on. She told herself he wouldn't recognize her. She looked nothing like the scrawny, wild-haired girl from the group home. Life had eroded her edges, dulled her shine. She was just a woman in a blue uniform, fading into the beige walls. She convinced herself she was safe in her anonymity. Tonight, the hospital was buzzing with a frenetic energy. A storm was battering the city, and the trauma unit was overflowing, bleeding chaos into the upper floors. Stella was mopping a spill near the elevators on the VIP wing, the quietest and most exclusive part of the hospital. The lights here were softer, the floors carpeted in plush gray, making her work harder. She was on her knees, scrubbing a stubborn coffee stain from the baseboard, when the elevator chime rang out, a soft, singular note that signaled the arrival of the executive lift. The doors slid open. The sound of confident voices spilled out, but one voice cut through the rest. It was deep, baritone, and commanding. "I don't care about the board's budget, nurse. The patient needs the MRI now. If they have a problem with the cost, tell them to bill me personally." Stella froze. Her hand, clutching the sponge, hovered over the carpet. It was him. Dr. Logan Prescott stepped out, flanked by 3 anxious residents and a head nurse. He looked exhausted, but it was a glamorous exhaustion. He was rubbing his temples, his jaw set in a line of grim determination. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world and annoyed that it wasn't heavier. He walked briskly down the hall, his entourage struggling to keep up. Stella shrank back, making herself as small as possible against the wall, pulling her cart in front of her like a shield. "Don't look up," she chanted internally. "Just be the furniture. Just be the ghost." He passed her. The scent of him, rain, expensive soap, and something uniquely him, washed over her, triggering a landslide of memories she had spent a decade burying. He was 3 steps past her. She let out a shaky breath, safe. Then he stopped. It wasn't a slow deceleration. It was a sudden, jarring halt, as if he had walked into an invisible wall. The residents bumped into each other to avoid hitting him. The hallway went silent. "Dr. Prescott," the nurse asked tentatively, "is everything all right?" Logan didn't answer. He turned around slowly. His eyes scanned the floor of the cart, and then landed on Stella, who was still kneeling, her head bowed. "You," he said. The word wasn't a question. It was a targeted strike. Stella's heart stopped. She stared at the pattern on the carpet, terrified. Had she missed a spot? Was she in the way? "Stand up," Logan commanded. His voice was soft, terrifyingly so. It wasn't the voice he used for the board members or the residents. It was different. Slowly, painfully, Stella rose to her feet. She kept her eyes on the middle button of his white coat, refusing to meet his gaze. She wiped her damp hands on her apron, trembling. "Look at me," he said. She couldn't disobey. The authority in his voice was absolute. Slowly, she lifted her chin. Her brown eyes, wide with fear and hidden sorrow, met his icy blue stare. The impact was physical. Time seemed to warp, the hospital corridor dissolving into the background. For a second, she saw the boy from the foster home, the boy who had held her hand during the thunderstorms. But then she saw the billionaire doctor, the stranger. Logan stared at her with an intensity that burned. He didn't smile. He didn't gasp. His face was unreadable, a mask of stone. He studied her features, the curve of her jaw, the sadness in her eyes, the name tag that simply read staff. He knew. There was no way he couldn't know. But he didn't say her name. He didn't say Stella. Instead, a flicker of something dark and unreadable passed through his eyes. Pain? Anger? Longing? It was gone too fast to trace. "This floor is not clean enough for my patients," Logan said, his voice dropping to a whisper that only she could hear, though it carried a weight that crushed her. "Come to my office in 10 minutes. I need to discuss the standards of this facility." He turned sharply, his white coat snapping with the movement, and continued down the hall without looking back. The residents scurried after him, casting pitying glances at the maid who was about to be reprimanded. Stella stood alone in the hallway, her knees shaking so hard she had to grab the handle of her cart for support. He hadn't acknowledged their past. He hadn't smiled. He had treated her like an incompetent employee. She thought he hadn't remembered her. But as she replayed the look in his eyes, she realized with a dawning horror that it might be worse. He remembered, and he wasn't happy about it. She was summoned to the lion's den, and she had nowhere to hide. The walk to Dr. Prescott's office was the longest journey Stella had ever taken. The corridor stretched out like a sterile white tunnel, the fluorescent lights humming a low, monotonous tune that matched the dread pooling in her stomach. Every step she took in her rubber-soled work shoes squeaked against the linoleum, a sound that announced her inferiority in this temple of silence. She clutched her cleaning rag like a talisman, her knuckles white, her mind racing through a dozen apologies for spills she hadn't made and messes she hadn't left. When she reached the heavy oak door with the frosted glass pane, she hesitated. The nameplate was engraved in silver, Logan Prescott, M.D., Chief of Neurosurgery. It was a title that commanded respect, a title that separated him from the rest of humanity. It was a universe away from Lo, the boy who used to skip stones with her in the muddy creek behind the group home. Stella knocked. The sound was faint, tentative. "Enter!" His voice came from within, deep and vibrating with an authority that made the wood beneath her fingers tremble. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The office was vast, dimly lit by a sleek desk lamp and the glow of the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling window. It smelled of aged paper, leather, and that distinct, sharp scent of rain she had noticed in the hallway. Logan was standing with his back to her, looking out at the city, his hands clasped behind his back. The posture of a king surveying his kingdom. "Close the door," he said. He didn't turn around. Stella obeyed, the click of the latch sounding loud and final, sealing them in a private capsule. She stood by the door, afraid to step onto the plush Persian rug in her work shoes. "Dr. Prescott, I apologize if the hallway wasn't—" "Stop," Logan interrupted. He turned slowly, stepping out of the shadows. The harsh hospital lighting was gone here, replaced by the soft amber of the lamp, which cast his sharp features in relief. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes speaking of sleepless nights and life-or-death decisions. But his gaze was burning. "Do not speak to me about the floors, Stella." He said her name. It hung in the air, heavy and sweet, stripping away the uniforms and the years. He walked toward her, not with the brisk pace of a surgeon, but with a slow, predatory gravitation. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his icy blue eyes, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. "I thought I was hallucinating," Logan whispered, his voice losing its professional edge, cracking slightly. "I thought the stress had finally broken me. I saw a ghost in the hallway." "I'm not a ghost, Logan," Stella said softly, her voice trembling. "I'm just the cleaning staff." "Don't," he snapped, a flash of anger crossing his face. He reached out as if to touch her arm, then pulled back, his hand clenching into a fist at his side. "Don't reduce yourself to that. Not in front of me." "It's who I am," Stella countered, a spark of her old defiance igniting. She lifted her chin, refusing to be ashamed of her survival. "We didn't all get adopted by billionaires, Lo. Some of us just grew up." The nickname hit him like a physical blow. He flinched, his eyes darkening. He stepped closer, invading her personal space, collapsing the distance between the penthouse and the pavement. "Do you think I wanted to leave?" Logan asked, the intensity of his gaze pinning her to the door. "Do you think I forgot? I wrote to you, every week for 3 years. I sent letters to the home until my hands cramped." "I never got them," Stella whispered, the tragedy of their lost years settling over her like a cold blanket. "They told me you moved on. They said rich boys don't remember where they came from." Silence is the loudest scream of things left unsaid. Logan let out a ragged breath, running a hand through his perfect hair, ruining the composure he was famous for. He looked at her uniform, at the fraying collar, at the scar on her neck that he remembered from childhood. He looked furious, not at her, but at the world that had treated her so unkindly while handing him everything on a silver platter. "I didn't move on," Logan said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous rumble. "I searched. When I turned 18, I hired investigators. I spent a fortune trying to find Stella Vance. They told me you had vanished. They told me you were dead." Stella's breath hitched. He had looked for her. The billionaire doctor, the man on the magazine covers, had spent years hunting for the girl from the group home. The knowledge was a bomb and a knife twisting in her heart at the same time. "I'm here," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I've been here for 2 years, Logan, cleaning your hospital." "Under my nose," he murmured, shaking his head in disbelief. He took a step closer, breaking the final barrier of propriety. He reached out and, with infinite tenderness, brushed a stray lock of hair from her forehead. His fingers were warm, the touch of a healer, but they trembled against her skin. It was a forbidden touch. He was the chief of surgery. She was the help. In this room, with the door locked, they were just Lo and Stella. But outside that door, they were galaxies apart. "You look tired, Stella," he said softly, his thumb grazing her cheekbone. "You look like you've been carrying the world." "It's heavy," she admitted, leaning into his touch for a fraction of a second before pulling back, remembering her place. I should go. If anyone sees us, let them see, Logan said fiercely. I own this floor. But you don't own the rumors, Stella warned, stepping back onto the hard floor, away from the rug, away from him. And you have a reputation, Dr. Prescott. I can't be the stain on it. She reached for the door handle, desperate to escape the intoxicating gravity of his presence before she did something foolish, like fall in love with him all over again. But before she could turn the latch, the intercom on his desk buzzed, a harsh, jarring sound that shattered the intimacy of the moment. Dr. Prescott! A crisp, female voice announced. Dr. Evelyn Sinclair is here. She says it's urgent regarding the engagement party preparations. Logan froze. His hand fell to his side. The light in his eyes dimmed, replaced by a sudden guarded wall. Stella looked at him, the blood draining from her face. Engagement party. The word hung between them, a guillotine blade waiting to drop. He wasn't just a doctor. He wasn't just rich. He was taken. The connection they had just rekindled, the tenderness of his touch, was suddenly tainted by the reality of his current life. Stella, wait! Logan started, panic flashing in his eyes. No, sir, Stella whispered, reverting to the formal address, putting the armor back on. Dr. Sinclair is waiting, and I have floors to mop. She opened the door and hurried out, nearly colliding with a stunningly beautiful woman in a white coat who was reaching for the handle. Evelyn Sinclair looked at Stella with mild annoyance, brushing past her as if she were a piece of furniture, and walked into Logan's office. Stella fled down the hallway, the sound of the door clicking shut behind her echoing like a gunshot. He remembered her. He had searched for her, but he belonged to someone else. The revelation wasn't a bridge. It was a chasm, wider and deeper than the one that had separated them as children. She was back in the sterile hallway, invisible again, but now she carried the crushing weight of knowing exactly what she had lost. The week leading up to the Prescott Charity Gala was a suffocating exercise in avoidance. Stella became a master of disappearance, taking the graveyard shifts, cleaning the basement levels, doing anything to avoid the neurosurgery wing. She couldn't bear to see Logan. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the ghost of his touch on her cheek, followed immediately by the sting of the word fiancé. But the hospital was a living organism, and eventually all veins led back to the heart. On Thursday evening, the order came down. The executive conference room on the top floor needed to be prepped for an emergency board meeting regarding the merger with the Sinclair family's hospital network. The regular cleaning crew was busy with the gala setup downstairs, leaving Stella as the only option. She took the elevator up, her stomach twisting into knots. The top floor was silent, bathed in the indigo light of the evening. She hoped to be in and out before the meeting started. She was wiping down the long mahogany table, the smell of lemon polish sharp in the air, when voices drifted from the adjacent anteroom. The door was slightly ajar. Stella froze. She recognized the voices instantly. It was Logan, his tone sharp and defensive, and the cool, clipped cadence of Evelyn Sinclair. "You're distracted, Logan," Evelyn said. "My father is noticing. The board is noticing. You've been chasing ghosts all week." "I'm not chasing ghosts, Evelyn," Logan replied, sounding exhausted. "I'm trying to rectify a mistake. I found her. After 15 years, she was right here." Stella's heart hammered against her ribs. She gripped the cleaning rag, unable to move, unable to breathe. "And now that you found her, what?" Evelyn asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous, silky whisper. "Are you going to parade the janitor in front of the donors? Are you going to introduce the help as the long-lost love of the great Dr. Prescott?" "She is not the help to me," Logan snapped. "She is to everyone else," Evelyn countered brutally. "Look at your life, Logan. Look at this hospital. We're on the verge of the biggest medical merger in the state. If you blow this up for a childhood sentiment, you destroy everything your father built. You destroy the research funding. You destroy the patients. The truth is a blade that cuts deepest when wielded by those who know where we bleed. There was a long, agonizing silence. Stella waited for him to fight. She waited for the boy who had promised to come back for her, to tell Evelyn that love mattered more than a merger. "It's not about love, Evelyn," Logan finally said. His voice was low, defeated, and devoid of the passion he had shown in his office. "It's about guilt. I left her behind. I owe her. I need to make sure she's safe. That's all this is." The words hit Stella with the force of a physical blow. Guilt. Oh. He didn't love her. He pitied her. The search, the letters, the tenderness in his office, it wasn't romance. It was the charity of a billionaire trying to assuage his conscience for surviving when she hadn't. He saw her as a broken thing he needed to fix to clear his ledger, not as a woman he wanted to hold. "Then write her a check," Evelyn said coldly. "Give her a severance package and send her away. That's how we deal with liabilities, Logan. We don't marry them." I can't just send her away," Logan stammered, but the hesitation was enough. He hadn't said no. He hadn't said she is my life. He had just said he couldn't do it yet. Stella felt a tear slide down her cheek, hot and humiliating. She didn't wait to hear the rest. She quietly backed out of the conference room, leaving the table half-polished. She walked to the service elevator, her legs feeling like lead. The hope that had sparked in Logan's office, the foolish, dangerous hope that he still saw the girl he loved, was extinguished. She wasn't his equal. She wasn't his lost love. She was his liability. She was a problem to be solved with a checkbook. As the elevator doors closed, shutting out the voices of the elite, Stella made a decision. She wouldn't be his charity case. She wouldn't be the stain on his reputation or the ghost haunting his merger. She went to the basement locker room, stripped off her blue uniform, and folded it neatly on the bench. She placed her ID badge on top of it. She didn't write a resignation letter. She didn't leave a note. She simply picked up her worn bag and walked out of the loading dock into the pouring rain. Logan Prescott had spent years searching for her, but tonight, his words had done what time and distance couldn't. They had forced her to disappear for good. The separation was absolute, fueled by a misunderstanding that felt like the absolute truth. She was leaving him not because she didn't love him, but because she loved him enough to save him from herself. The gala was beginning. The ballroom of the Prescott Medical Center glittered with crystal and false smiles, a masquerade of wealth where the currency was influence. But Dr. Logan Prescott was not shaking hands with donors. He was standing in the basement locker room, staring at a blue uniform folded with military precision on a wooden bench. On top of it sat a plastic ID card. Stella Vance. Staff. It looked like a tombstone. Evelyn appeared in the doorway, her white gown shimmering like crushed diamonds, her face a mask of irritated perfection. "Logan, the chairman is asking for you," she snapped. "What are you doing in this filth? We have a merger to announce." Logan picked up the ID card. His thumb traced the small, grainy photo of Stella's face. The silence inside him shattered. He realized that for 15 years, he had been building a life that looked perfect on paper but felt like a prison in reality. He looked at Evelyn, at the merger, the duty, the cold ambition, and he felt nothing. "There is no merger," Logan said quietly. "Excuse me." Evelyn laughed nervously. "I said there is no merger," Logan repeated, turning to face her, his eyes blazing with a terrifying clarity. "And there is no wedding. I spent half my life trying to be the Prescott heir. I'm done." He didn't wait for her scream. He walked past her, out of the locker room, and out of the hospital. He didn't take his car, he ran. He ran into the rain that was drowning the city, hailing a taxi with the desperation of a man whose life support had just been cut. He gave the driver the address he had memorized from the private investigator's report, a crumbling tenement in South Philly. Fear is the only thing faster than love, but love has more endurance. Stella was packing. Her small apartment was a landscape of cardboard boxes and peeling wallpaper. She wasn't crying anymore. She was numb. She was leaving Philadelphia. She couldn't stay in a city where the skyline mocked her with his name. A pounding on the door made her jump. It wasn't a polite knock, it was a demand. She opened it, expecting the landlord. Instead, she found Logan. He was soaked, his tuxedo ruined, his hair plastered to his forehead. He looked wild, breathless, and utterly stripped of his composure. "You left," he gasped, stepping into the room without invitation. "I resigned," Stella corrected, stepping back, clutching a ceramic mug like a shield. "I heard you, Logan. In the conference room. I heard you tell her I was just guilt. A liability to be paid off. I lied," Logan shouted, the sound filling the small room. He slammed the door shut behind him, shutting out the storm. "I lied to her, Stella. Because if I told Evelyn the truth, that I have loved you since I was 12 years old, she would have destroyed you." Stella froze. The mug slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. "What?" "She controls the board," Logan said, stepping over the broken shards, ignoring the danger. "She threatened to blacklist you from every job in the city if I showed any unprofessional interest. I called you a liability to make you sound worthless to her. I had to make her believe I didn't care, so she wouldn't target you." You protected me," Stella whispered, her voice trembling. "I tried," Logan said, his voice breaking. "But I failed, because in trying to save you from her, I lost you to myself." He reached into his pocket, but it wasn't a checkbook he pulled out. It was a small, worn piece of paper, folded 100 times. He unfolded it with shaking hands. It was a drawing, a crude, crayon drawing of 2 stick figures holding hands under a sun, with the words "Lo" and "Stella" written in childish scrawl. "I kept this," Logan said, tears mixing with the rain on his face. "In my wallet, for 15 years. Through med school, through the residency, through the fame. Every time I saved a life, I wished I could tell you. Every time I felt alone in that penthouse, I looked at this. The heart keeps a ledger that the mind tries to burn. My ledger only has one name, Stella," Logan choked out, using the leitmotif that defined their tragedy. "It never had Evelyn's name. It never had the hospital's name. It was always you." Stella looked at the drawing. It was the one she had given him the day he was adopted. The day he left. He hadn't just remembered her. He had carried her with him every single day. The wall of pain she had built collapsed. The liability was a lie. The love was the truth. She looked at the man standing in her ruin of an apartment, offering her his heart instead of his money. "You ruined your tuxedo," she wept, a smile breaking through the tears. "I ruined my life," Logan corrected her, closing the distance between them. "Or maybe I just started it." He didn't wait. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her neck, holding her as if she were the only solid thing in a dissolving world. It wasn't a perfect fix. He had just destroyed a billion-dollar merger and publicly humiliated a powerful family, but as he held her, the silence was finally filled. The reconciliation had begun, fragile and wet with rain, but for the first time in 15 years, they were standing under the same roof, and neither of them was looking for the exit. The storm that had battered Philadelphia finally broke just before dawn. The relentless gray rain gave way to a bruised, purple sky that promised the sun, though the air remained thick with the scent of wet pavement and ozone. Inside Stella's small apartment, the silence was absolute. It wasn't the sterile, terrifying silence of the Prescott Medical Center, nor was it the lonely silence of Stella's nights spent scrubbing floors. It was the warm, heavy silence of 2 people who had finally stopped running. Logan sat on the edge of Stella's worn sofa his tuxedo shirt unbuttoned, his expensive shoes kicked off into the corner. He held a mug of cheap instant coffee, as if it were a rare vintage. His phone, lying face down on the scratched coffee table, had been vibrating incessantly for hours. Calls from the board, from Evelyn, from the press. The world outside was demanding an explanation for the prince of neurosurgery's sudden abdication. But Logan didn't reach for the device. He was watching Stella. She stood by the window, the morning light catching the curve of her neck, the same neck he had watched from across the hospital hallways for months, aching to touch. She turned to him, her eyes clear, stripped of the fear that had defined their interactions in the hospital. "They're going to destroy you, you know," Stella said softly. "The papers, the Sinclair family, they won't let you walk away with your reputation intact." Logan took a sip of the coffee, grimacing slightly at the bitterness, but smiling nonetheless. "Reputation is just a story people tell about you when you're not in the room, Stella. I'm tired of that room. I'd rather be here." "But your work," she pressed, the worry etching a line between her brows. "You save lives, Logan. You can't just stop." "I won't stop saving lives," he replied, setting the mug down. He stood up and walked to her, the floorboards creaking under his weight. "But I'm done saving the bank accounts of the board members. There are other hospitals. There are clinics in neighborhoods like this one that need a neurosurgeon more than the VIP wing does." He reached out, taking her hands that were rough from years of harsh chemicals and hard labor. He raised them to his lips, kissing the knuckles, honoring the struggle written on her skin. "I spent 15 years trying to scrub away where I came from," Logan whispered against her skin. "I thought that if I climbed high enough, the boy from the group home would disappear. But he didn't. He was just waiting for you. The transition wasn't easy. The fallout was messy and public. The tabloids ran headlines about the billionaire doctor's meltdown and the maid who stole the air. But Logan and Stella didn't read them. They were too busy building something real from the wreckage. Logan resigned from Prescott Medical. He sold the penthouse, the glass cage in the sky, and used the funds to open a private practice in the same district where he and Stella had grown up. It wasn't glamorous. The floors weren't marble, and the clientele didn't arrive in limousines. But the waiting room was always full, and the doctor actually smiled. Stella didn't go back to cleaning floors. She went back to school. With Logan's support, not as charity, but as a partnership, she enrolled in the art program she had abandoned a decade ago. She painted the city not as a gray prison, but as a place of hidden colors. And her favorite subject was a man with icy blue eyes who had learned how to thaw. One evening, 6 months later, they stood together on the roof of their new, shared brownstone. The city lights twinkled in the distance, no longer taunting them, but simply decorating the night. Logan wrapped his arms around Stella from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. They watched the skyline of the Prescott Medical Center in the distance, a looming giant that no longer held any power over them. "Do you miss it?" Stella asked, leaning back into his warmth. "The power? The view from the top?" Logan tightened his hold on her. "I never had a view, Stella. I was just looking at reflections. Now I see everything." He turned her around to face him. The wind caught her hair, whipping it across her face, and he laughed, tucking it behind her ear. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated freedom. "We spent so long trying to balance the books," Logan said softly, his gaze intense and loving. "I thought I owed you. I thought I had to pay for leaving you behind. And now I know," he murmured, leaning his forehead against hers. "There is no debt in love, only the truth. The heart keeps a ledger that the mind tries to burn." The leitmotif returned to them, not as a curse, but as a benediction. They realized that the ledger hadn't been keeping track of debts or sins. It had been keeping track of the moments they belonged to each other, the shared lunch in the foster home, the letters sent into the void, the look in the hallway, the drawing in the wallet. The mind had tried to burn it to survive the pain of separation, but the heart had refused to let the ink fade. The doctor and the maid had dismantled the hierarchy of their world to find a level ground. They had proven that dignity isn't found in a title, and love isn't found in a merger. Logan Prescott kissed the woman he had searched for, the woman who had scrubbed his floors while holding his heart. In the quiet of the night, surrounded by the noise of the city they had conquered by simply surviving it, they finally closed the book on the past and opened the page to a future that belonged only to them. He spent a lifetime learning how to fix the human brain, only to realize that it was the girl with the mop who held the only cure for his own broken soul.